Okay, so learning target 3 in Unit 1 has to do with taking all that good stuff that we just went over with the real numbers and now applying that to some real world problems. Real world obviously meaning, hey, I'm going to see this in my life at some point in time, okay? So if we start out with integers, one of the most common examples that comes to mind is sea level, right? Okay, so we know that sea level represents the integers or the whole number 0 or the yes, and anything above that would be represented with a positive and anything below that is negative. So I'm going to give you some examples dealing with these real world problems here. So let's say, for example, you have a fish that is swimming 30 feet below sea level. Okay, so the first thing we would do when we start out in 7th grade is not just operations with integers, is what integer does this represent? So this obviously represents an integer of 30 below, which is negative 30. Okay, so let's say then in 8th grade we're going to add to this. So this fish is swimming 30 feet below sea level. It sees another fish that it's ready to eat, and it swims up 5 feet, just to keep the numbers easy here. Okay, so then I'm going to ask you, what integer represents the location of the fish now? So what integer, in this case, represents its location in relation to sea level? So this is down 30, up 5, represents 25 feet below sea level still, okay? So let's say that same fish is still 30 feet below sea level, and it's one of those flying fish. You ever see that on one of those crazy channels where they're all like, they can jump out of the water? So let's say it jumps from 30 feet below 5 feet above sea level, okay? So the question then wouldn't be, I mean, I guess it could be, I could ask you two things. What is their integer now? Well, their integer now is positive 5, but the question I want to ask you is, how many feet did that fish travel? If it was 30 feet below and it traveled and jumped in the air 5 feet, so this would not be a subtract. It traveled 30 feet just to get back to the surface of the water and then 5 feet above. So this is actually a fish traveling 35 feet, okay? So those are our sea level problems, okay? Another real-world example could have to do with football, okay? So not sure if you understand football or not. We have something called the line of scrimmage. I don't know it 100%, but bear with me here. So the line of scrimmage is 0, okay? So your goal is to get 4 downs, and you have to make, or in 4 downs to make it a total of 10 yards. So if the team is rushing this way, if it gains 5 yards, but then loses 7, that takes it back behind the line of scrimmage, so the overall integer compared to the line of scrimmage, just like we compared it to sea level here, would be negative 2, right? So it was supposed to get 10, it got negative 2. So to get the next down, it still needs to go how many yards? 12. 2 just to get back to 0, and 10 more to get that down, okay? So you're going to see problems like a team on the first down, it traveled 5 yards. On the second down, it got pushed, it lost a yard. In the third down, it lost 3 yards. And in the fourth down, it had a gain of 2 yards, okay? So then the question is going to be, where are they now in relation to that line of scrimmage? And really, if you have to, you could just very easily do this problem by setting up a little expression there. If you remember from Learning Target 2, I like to kind of add my integers first. So it had a total of 4 yards loss, a gain of 7 yards, and when you add those together, after all 4 plays, it only had a gain of 3. If this number would have been a negative, then it would have been an overall loss of yards, and that's our football example, okay? Another example to talk about is like profit. So let's say this new company, what was it? My daughter told me about Pinkberry is opening up in the mall soon. So let's say the first year, a lot of people don't know about it, so they only made, or the first month, let's say, keep it simple, a $500 profit. Okay, the next month, they had a loss. Maybe the product wasn't that great, so they had a profit. Well, actually, and here's the thing: instead of calling it a profit or a loss, you could call it a profit of a negative 100. So if their profit was a negative 100, it means they actually lost money that month. So you need to start to look at negatives as that. And then whatever, the next month they lost another 100, okay? So if I were to ask you what was their overall profit after these 3 months, so if this was the first month, the second month, and the third month, then you would take 500 that they made and add the negative 200 to it that they lost. After 3 months, they still made a profit and not a loss, okay? If I were to say to you, what would their average monthly sales be? You know, average is you add them all up and then you divide by the number of months. So it would be on average 100, okay? So that then is our company profit. Let's see, you can also deal with, let's talk about like water evaporating, okay? So let's say you have a fish tank. Okay, and I don't know about you, my fish tank, I swear I look at it and I feel like I have to fill it up with water every time because it's constantly evaporating. So let's say, we're going to get into the integer part of it. Let's say it evaporates at a rate of 0.45 inches. So the water in my fish tank is evaporating at 0.45 inches every week. Okay? I need to know then that it started with, let's say I had a fish tank that was 20 inches tall. It started with 20 inches of water. My question, actually let's change this today just to kind of keep you on your toes here. So this much water in inches, just a little under half an inch of water, evaporates every day. There are 20 inches to start. I may ask you a question, how many inches of water would be left at the end of the week? This is something you're going to want to look at and think about in real-world problems. I gave you days, but I asked for weeks, so there's a little bit of conversion going on. Okay, so this is a multi-step problem. So step one, what we're going to want to do is figure out if it goes down this much each day, then how many times would it go down, how many inches would it go down in 7 days? So you're going to 45 times 7, and that gives you a negative 3.15. I really want you to understand why I wrote that as a negative, because it's evaporating. We're losing water. This whole unit is about real world and the numbers that represent them. So this is a loss of 3 inches, 3.15 inches, and if there were 20 inches to start, then obviously what you need to do from there is do your subtraction. So step 2 would be 20 inches minus the 3.15, and there would be 1685. This is a positive integer because you can't have that negative evaporation. There can't be any less than 0 inches of water in that tank, okay? We could do the same example here with like an elevator. So let's say you're in an elevator and you are 500 feet above the ground, okay? And when you get in an elevator and you descend, okay, descend means you're going down. So when you descend, you push that button, and sometimes you get those elevators that go so fast it makes your tummy kind of sick a little bit. So let's just say this one is descending 3 feet per second. That's not too fast, okay? So 3 feet per second. And it's because it's descending 3 feet per second, that is going to represent a negative number. So it's descending 3 feet per second. My question then is going to be, I could ask, where would it be, or how many feet above the ground would it be after a minute? Then you would have to know to multiply this by 60. Okay, so how many after, I guess let's say how many per minute? How many, well, I could ask you a couple things. How many feet did it descend in a minute? Or then I could ask, what location would it be at? Do you see how that's a two-part question? How many feet did it descend in 1 minute, meaning every second, so that would be 3, 6, 9, 12. Well, I'm not going to count by 3s up to 60. I'm going to take that and multiply it. So it descended 180 feet in a minute. But if that's not what I ask you, you have to be prepared to answer the question I ask you. Maybe not how many feet did it descend in a minute, but now what is its new location compared to where it was and where it started at. And that way you'll need to know to take that 500, subtract that 180, and 500 minus 180 is going to give you your 320. Okay? So you have to really be careful about what it's asking you for. And then you're going to see problems where there's a parking garage. Okay? In parking garages, I'm not sure if there's some underground parking garages. So just like sea level was 0, okay, so you can park 4 floors down. So what if this parking garage is 10 stories? 8 of them are above and 4 are below, or 2 are below. So you have to be able to answer those types of integer questions as well. Okay? Another good example with real world scenarios is temperatures. We saw a lot of negative temperatures last year. We had a record number of cold days. And the law says that if it is with wind chill 20 below or cooler, that we have to call school, right? So we can talk about temperatures a lot. So let's say the average temperatures for a week or 5 days in February were 3 below, 8 below, okay? Maybe we had a day of 1 degree temperatures, then a degree of 10 degrees, and then we had a negative 15 degree, okay? So if I ask you what was the average temperature for these 5 days, what you have to do is remember that you have to take average is mean, right? Mean means divide them all up and add them all up and divide by the numbers that you added. So for me, what I would like to do is add my negatives first and come up with one negative answer. So that 15 plus 11 is going to give you negative 26 degrees that are negative, 11 degrees that are positive. And then you're going to take that, and because the signs are different, and we learned that in that first lesson, right? That you're going to subtract those two because the signs are different. That's going to give you a negative 15 divided by 5. The average temperature for those 3 days was 3 degrees below 0. So I need you to know how to do those averages. And you know what? I'm going through with some pretty quick, easy, but the temperatures I give you might not be like that. It might be negative 3.7. 4.8, okay, and that's really precise, but you have to be prepared to deal with those decimals as well, okay? Another real world example I want to talk about is golf, okay? A lot of people, maybe just like you didn't know what the line of scrimmage was in football, golf is par, okay? And on a golf course, each hole has a par. And if it's a par 3, it means that the people who created this course feel like you should, from the first drive that you hit to the last putt that you hit, you should make it into that hole in 3 strokes. Anything above 3 strokes, you're over par. And anything below 3 strokes is under par. So this is a game where you want to get the lowest score, okay? So if you make par, what score gets added to your scorecard? 0, okay? Because you weren't above or below it, okay? And then they have special names for it, birdies and bogeys and all that good stuff, okay? So let's say that the first 4 holes of the golf course. I said 4 and then wrote it. 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first one you were under par by 1. It was a par 4, but you made it in 3 shots. Okay. Second hole you made par. The third hole you used up all your luck and you were 2 over par, meaning you're supposed to make it in 3 shots and it took you 5. Okay, and then you made par on this one. Okay, so this isn't an average problem. Par is not. It's a what's your score now? So if you started here, you were under 1. These two kind of don't mean anything. You were 1 under, but 2 over, which means you're 1 over par, and that's represented by a positive 1. Okay? If you were having a good day and you had 1 under, 2 under and 2 pars, then your score would be 3 under, negative 3, which means you'd be 3 under par, which is represented by the integer negative 3. Okay, so that's your golf example. Okay, let's talk about test questions. All right, so let's say there's a professor who, when you take a quiz, let's say out of, he gives you 5 points for every correct answer. Okay, you get negative 2 points for every incorrect answer. And if you leave it blank, usually you get 0. This guy doesn't like it when people leave it blank. You get 1 point off for blank questions, okay? So that's how your test score is determined. So let's say somebody took a test and they had 15 questions correct. They had 4 incorrect. And this person didn't proofread. They left 2 blank. Okay, so this is a multi-step process or problem here. So the first thing you're going to want to do, and you can show your work for this. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So you're going to say there were 15 problems correct, and each of those was worth 5. So then you figure out the total number of correct points that you get, and that's 75. You had 4 that were incorrect, and each incorrect point earned you a negative 2 points. So it took 2 points away for every, so that you don't have 75 points anymore, right? Because you have to take 8 away. And then you left 2 blank, and that's worth a negative 1. So you got to take 2 more points off of that. So then when you add all these together, you have 75 positive points and 10 negative points. Out of 75 points there, you would get a 65. Okay, so those are your test question real world examples. Okay.